In our headlines on this Thursday, July 3rd, here in South Korea. President Lee Jae Myung holds a press conference earlier this morning to mark his first full month at the top office. And the National Assembly approves the President's nomination of Kim Min-seok for the post of Prime Minister. Meanwhile, heatwave advisories remain in place across the nation, with morning lows ranging from 23 to 28 degrees Celsius and daytime highs reaching up to 37 degrees. We start here on the national front with a press conference held by the President to mark his first full month at the top office earlier on this Thursday. On the agenda were issues of much interest ranging from the economy to security to diplomacy. For more on this, our top office correspondent Yoon Jung-min is standing by live with details. Jung-min, it's good to have you on. I understand much ground was covered. Do start us off.
Right, Sunny. A host of issues were covered during the 2-hour-long press conference at the Yongbin-gwan Hall at the Blue House, under the title of Asked by the Press, Answers to the Public. First, take a listen to what President Lee had to say, marking his 30th day in office.
지난 30일은 공난의 파도를 함께 건너고 계신 우리 국민 여러분의 간절한 열망을 매 순간 가슴에 새기며 하루하루 치열하게 달려온 시간이었습니다. 무엇보다 무너진 민생 회복에 전력을 다하는 중입니다.
For the remaining 4 years and 11 months, the new South Korean president vowed to make full efforts to stabilize the people's livelihoods and the cost of living. He promised to spare no effort in investing in AI, chips, renewable energy, and the culture industry for future growth.
Right, and Jung-min, what did he have to say with regard to his foreign policy?
Right, Sunny. So the president was mindful of trade negotiations with the U.S. as the Trump administration's deadline for tariff talks is less than a week away. He said one thing that he could say for sure was that it's not easy.
그래서 7월 8일까지 끝낼 수 있는지도 확언하기 어려워요. 지금 최선을 다하고 있습니다. 최선을 다하고 있고 또 쌍방의 모두에게 도움이 되는 그야말로 호혜적인 그런 결과를 만들어내야 하는데 아직까지도 쌍방이 정확하게 뭘 원하는지가 명확하게 정리되지는 못한 상태입니다.
He went on to say that his government is looking for topics in many different fields. On North Korea, the commander-in-chief vowed to improve relations with Pyongyang based on the South Korea-U.S. alliance, as well as the three-way cooperation with Japan, urging the importance of dialogue and communication.
대화를 전면 단절하는 건 그건 정말 바보짓이죠. 미워도 얘기를 들어야 되거든요. 그리고 협상하고 정치나 외교에서는 감정을 배제해야 된다.
The town hall-style presser took place under the theme of Closer, Broader, and Anew, bringing the seats of the reporters closer to the president's desk without a podium. I should also note that the press conference took place unusually fast, just 30 days since President Lee Jae Myung took office, breaking a long tradition of South Korean presidents holding their pressers around the 100-day milestone. Back to you, Sunny.
All right, Jung-min, thank you for the latest from the President's first press conference held earlier this morning, that is, to mark 1 month at the top office. Moving on then, the Parliament has approved the President's nomination of Kim Min-seok for the post of Prime Minister. The approval was unilaterally pushed ahead by the ruling party amid a boycott by the main opposition party. Our political correspondent Shin Ha-young reports.
Four-term lawmaker Kim Min-seok has finally been given the green light to take the post of Prime Minister 29 days after being nominated by President Lee Jae Myung. This comes after the National Assembly approved his appointment on Thursday to the only cabinet post in South Korea that requires parliamentary approval. Of the 179 votes cast, 173 lawmakers voted in favor, 3 voted against, and 3 ballots were invalid. The ruling Democratic Party, which holds a majority in the 22nd National Assembly, pushed the motion through unilaterally amid a boycott by the main opposition People Power Party.
Given the current crisis, it's a shame that the PPP continues to obstruct the process. If the confirmation of the Prime Minister, who is supposed to lead the cabinet, is delayed any further, the public won't stand for it.
Ahead of the plenary session, the PPP demanded Kim's withdrawal, calling him an unqualified nominee, citing his failure to submit key documents, particularly those related to his wealth.
There hasn't been a Prime Minister nominee with this many issues before. Once again, we urge President Lee Jae Myung, it's not too late. Withdraw Kim Min-seok's nomination.
The presidential office welcomed the approval, saying that it paves the way for Prime Minister Kim to work closely with President Lee and help him run state affairs smoothly. Meanwhile, despite the standoff over Kim's appointment, the parliament passed a revision of the Commercial Act during Thursday's plenary session, following an agreement reached the previous day. Among 272 lawmakers present, 220 voted in favor, 29 voted against, and 23 abstained. This was one of the contentious bills the two sides have been clashing over. The DP had pushed a revision to the act back in March, but it was vetoed by the previous administration. The revision aims to add the word shareholders to the director's duties from just company. It also introduces the so-called 3% rule, which caps the voting rights of the largest shareholder and related parties at 3% when appointing audit committee members at listed companies. The rule is intended to prevent undue influence and abuse of control by majority shareholders. This marks the first passage of a bill related to the people's livelihoods and the first time the rival parties have reached a bipartisan agreement on legislation since President Lee took office. 신하영, Arirang News.
And President Lee Jae Myung has called for close cooperation between his administration and the country's 5 minor parties at the parliament. The comments were made over lunch at the presidential residence, where the president sat down with the leaderships of the Rebuilding Korea Party, Jinbo Party, Reform Party, Basic Income Party, and the Social Democratic Party. The talks also covered the minor parties' thoughts regarding the tasks that they believe the new administration should seek to actively address, such as improving working conditions, reforming the prosecution as well as party systems, and pardoning politicians and labor activists deemed unfairly targeted by the former administration. Speaking to reporters, Senior Presidential Secretary for Political Affairs Woo Sang-ho added that the president intended to review the thoughts shared. Up next, we shed light on the Lee Jae Myung administration's economic initiatives over the past month and the plan ahead. Our Moon Ji-young has details.
President Lee has made it clear that his administration's top priority is the urgent recovery of people's livelihoods. This pressing focus on livelihoods stems from a challenging economic forecast that, as one expert recently highlighted, explains the government's strong emphasis on the critical need for immediate action.
Well, the growth rate this year is only expected to be 0.8% by the Bank of Korea, and a lot of international investment banks are predicting that it'll actually be worse. Some are predicting that the growth rate will only be 0.3%. The two main pillars of Korean economy is exports and domestic consumption, and both seems to be down very much this year.
President Lee has emphasized efforts to alleviate economic hardship, noting the swift activation of an emergency task force and the rapid allocation of a 30.5 trillion won supplementary budget, urging parliamentary approval to stimulate the economy. Beyond the immediate relief, a central theme of the president's address was an unwavering commitment to investing in future-oriented sectors. This includes advanced technology industries like AI and semiconductors, renewable energy initiatives, and the cultural sector. He articulated plans to prepare for a Kospi 5000 era by advancing capital markets, aiming to channel capital into productive areas and enable citizens to invest in growing enterprises, thereby increasing national wealth. He also outlined a vision for balanced national development, seeking to overcome regional disparities and foster industrial collaboration between large corporations, SMEs, and startups. Regarding tariff talks with the U.S., President Lee said the government has made utmost efforts on tariff negotiations, but he can't say whether the talks could be concluded by July 8th, a deadline set by U.S. President Donald Trump. 문지영, Arirang News.
Vietnam has become the second country to seal a tariff deal with the U.S. ahead of next week's deadline. Our Kim Do-yeon reports.
The U.S. has announced its second major tariff deal since U.S. President Donald Trump announced an increase on tariffs for imported goods on April 2nd. Trump took to Truth Social on Wednesday where he called the agreement with Vietnam a great deal. According to his post, Vietnam will pay a 20% tariff on all goods shipped to the U.S. and a 40% tariff on transshipped products, which are goods Vietnam imports from China and then re-exports to America to dodge existing tariffs. He also wrote that in return, Vietnam will grant the U.S. total access to its markets, eliminating tariffs on American goods. Trump noted that SUVs have a good chance of success in the Vietnamese market. Deputy Treasury Secretary Michael Faulkender on CNBC described the deal as a huge win, adding that more could be announced before the July 9th deadline. He noted that for many countries, the sticking points aren't tariff levels, but non-tariff barriers which often block American products. If those come down, he said, it reshapes the calculus for U.S. trade. Faulkender also warned that there will be no extension beyond July 9th and that he anticipates an announcement on the tariffs imposed on countries that have not or do not strike a deal. This comes as South Korea has yet to strike an agreement. Despite Trade Minister Yeo Han-gu's trip to Washington last week, the Wall Street Journal reports a deal isn't close. Soar is seeking relief on U.S. tariffs targeting auto, steel, and aluminum, while U.S. negotiators have concerns over Korea's regulations on digital giants like Google and Coupang. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
The U.S. Defense Department has reaffirmed its ironclad alliance with South Korea. When asked on Wednesday whether Washington may shrink the size of its soldiers stationed here in South Korea, spokesperson Sean Parnell simply cited the Pentagon's policy against public discussion about U.S. military posture reviews. He did nonetheless emphasize Washington's security commitments to Seoul. Recent speculation about the fate of U.S. troops here follows an earlier Wall Street Journal report about a possible withdrawal of some 4,500 American soldiers from South Korea. And South Korea and Poland have completed negotiations for the potential sale of a second set of K2 tanks from Hyundai Rotem to Warsaw, paving the path for a more permanent foothold for the South Korean arms maker over in Europe. Our defense correspondent Kim Bo-kyung reports.
South Korea's Hyundai Rotem has completed negotiations over a deal to export additional K2 tanks to Poland, according to the State Arms Procurement Agency on Wednesday. Though the specific size of the contract is yet to be disclosed, it is widely expected to be a deal worth around $6.5 billion, a little less than 9 trillion Korean won. This marks the first large-scale arms export deal completed under the new Lee Jae Myung administration, and also it will be Seoul's largest single arms export contract if the figure above is confirmed. The Defense Acquisition Program Administration said Seoul and Warsaw are currently coordinating to arrange the signing ceremony. With Russia's invasion of Ukraine, there has been a defense spending push in Poland. After signing a framework contract in July 2022, Warsaw signed a series of deals with South Korean defense companies later that year to acquire K2 tanks, K9 self-propelled howitzers, F-A-50 light attack aircraft, and the K-239 Chunmoo multiple launch rocket system. Following the first phase contract, second phase deals were made for the K-9 howitzers in 2023 and Chunmoo MLRS in 2024. Though the second phase contract for the K-2 tanks was expected to be signed around the same time as other weapon systems, negotiations took longer, only to be settled this year. Industry sources say with production facilities to be established in Poland, 117 units out of 180 K-2 tanks will be produced by Hyundai Rotem, while the rest will be locally made by Warsaw's state-owned Polish armaments group PGZ. An expert says this deal could further build momentum for Korea's defense industry, especially as NATO members are now committed to raising defense spending to 5% of GDP.
They has no defense industry over the 7 decades, so Rang military and K defense industry supported them to have their own self-defense capability in the long term, in the end, rather than U.S. weapon system who push country to buy only a weapon but not a copyright system or supporting system.
While leveraging strong defense capabilities and cost-effective production, Korea aims to boost defense export momentum in Europe. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News.
In other news, quite a number of people made their way to emergency rooms nationwide on Wednesday amid the blistering heatwave here in South Korea that continues today. Our An Sung-jin covers the scorching temperatures here.
South Korea remains in the grip of a heat wave. According to the Korea Meteorological Administration, heat wave advisories were issued across the country on Thursday, with morning lows ranging from 23 to 28 degrees and the daytime high reaching up to 37 degrees in some areas. As hot and humid conditions persist, the feel-like temperatures are expected to hover above 33 degrees in most parts of the country. With temperatures remaining over 25 degrees throughout the night as well, the capital Seoul has continued to see tropical nights since the first one of the year on June 29th. As the country continues to suffer, the Korea Disease Control and Prevention Agency stated that the number of those reported with heat-related illnesses reached 524 from May 15th till the 1st of July. The figure is 1.34 times more than the same period from last year. Health authorities are urging the public to take precautions by making sure to rest in cool environments and limit outdoor activities. Meanwhile, the rainy season has come to an early end. The KMA has announced that the monsoon season has officially ended on Jeju Island and in the southern regions, marking one of the earliest on record. As the North Pacific high air pressure system pushed the monsoon stationary front northwest, Jeju left the effective range on June 26th, and the southern regions have been out of the area of monsoon influence since Tuesday. For Jeju, it has been the earliest monsoon season ending since nationwide weather monitoring began in 1973, while for southern areas, it marked the second earliest. In terms of the monsoon period, both Jeju and the southern regions were the second shortest on record, lasting 15 and 13 days consecutively. However, the KMA said it's still too early to declare the end of the monsoon season in other regions, as a weakened stationary front near North Korea may temporarily affect the area. Rain is forecast for this week, though precipitation is expected to remain light. An Sung-jin, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, the Korea Baseball Organization has set a historic milestone. Over 7 million spectators made their way to stadiums in the first half of the baseball season for the first time since the organization's inception back in the year 1982. Also, almost half of the matches were sold out. The average per-game attendance this season currently stands at over 17,000, up 17% on year. Now, should this trend continue, the organization is on track to surpass 10 million spectators this season for the second straight year. And the National Museum of Korea welcomed more than 2.7 million visitors during the first half of this year, its largest figure in 2 decades. Now, it's also an on-year surge of over 64%. The number of foreign visitors also hit an all-time high during this period at almost 100,000. The museum is linking this trend to rising global interest in Korean culture, fueled by Korean content such as K-pop and K-dramas.
This is The World Now, bringing you the latest stories from around the globe. In the United States, in the trial of music mogul Sean Diddy Combs, the judge has upheld his convictions on lesser prostitution charges while clearing him of charges on racketeering, conspiracy, and sex trafficking, charges that could have put the hip-hop figure behind bars for life. A Manhattan federal court jury found Combs guilty on 2 counts under the Mann Act, transporting individuals for prostitution. This comes after a 7-week trial involving testimony from former partners Cassie Ventura, known as Cassie, and Jane, as well as other witnesses. However, Combs was acquitted on the 3 most serious charges, including racketeering, conspiracy, and 2 counts of sex trafficking, removing the threat of a potential life sentence. Combs bowed his head in the courtroom and said, "I'll be home soon," as supporters celebrated the partial verdict. However, he was denied bail ahead of sentencing, with the judge citing evidence of violence in personal relationships. Sentencing will take place later this year, but Combs likely faces several years behind bars. Exiled Tibetan spiritual leader the Dalai Lama has announced during his 90th birthday week that there will indeed be a successor after his death, directly challenging Beijing's claim that only it can control the process. Speaking in Dharamshala, India on Wednesday, the Dalai Lama affirmed that the institution of the Dalai Lama will continue and that the Khaden Phodrang Trust, alongside Tibetan Buddhist leaders, will hold sole authority to identify his reincarnation. He emphasized that his successor will likely be born outside China, underscoring his rejection of any candidate chosen under Beijing's system. The decision resolves long-standing uncertainty and safeguards against China's claims of authority over Tibetan spiritual succession. He outlined that the trust, founded in 2011 and governed by Tibetan exiles, will consult senior monks and follow traditional procedures, possibly even nominating a living successor during his lifetime. However, China asserts its own legal right to oversee the Dalai Lama's reincarnation and asserts that it would need to be approved by Beijing. Tech giant Microsoft announced on Wednesday that it will cut nearly 4% of its workforce, approximately 9,000 jobs, as part of a strategic shift to accelerate investments in artificial intelligence infrastructure. In a statement to investors, the company confirmed the layoffs would span multiple divisions, including global sales and marketing teams. This is Microsoft's 3rd major round of cuts this year, following approximately 6,000 layoffs in May and additional reductions in June, which have brought the total job losses for 2025 to more than 15,000. Microsoft plans an $80 billion capital expenditure for the fiscal year in support of its AI ambitions. In the U.S. state of Arizona, members of the Tohono O'odham Nation have begun their annual sacred saguaro fruit harvest, known as Bahidaj, marking the start of the new year. The ritual takes place over several weeks in late June to early July, when the ruby red fruit ripens atop the towering saguaro cactus that can reach 12 meters tall. The fruits once harvested are boiled into syrup, and some are fermented into wine, which is used for a rain ceremony. These ceremonies affirm ancestral bonds, the relationship with natural resources, and the resilience of the Native Americans' identity. Choi Ji-hee, Arirang News.
The heat is causing sleepless nights. There are many areas which have suffered from tropical nights, especially around the East Coast and inland areas. Arirang reached 38.3 degrees Celsius yesterday, recording the highest temperature this year. And Gangneung has had 2 super tropical nights in a row already, with nighttime temperatures above 30 degrees. Under heat wave warnings and advisories in most parts of the country, temperatures in Seoul soared up to 32 degrees and 37 degrees in Arirang during the day today. It will get hotter, with Seoul rising up to 34 degrees in the middle of next week. Tomorrow morning will start warm across the country at around 25 degrees. Daily highs will move up to 31 degrees in Seoul, 32 degrees in Chuncheon and Jeju. About 5 to 20 millimeters of rain is expected in Incheon, northern part of Gyeonggi-do province, and western part of Gangwon-do province tomorrow. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world. Those are the headlines at this hour here in South Korea. As always, thank you for watching.